In that last lesson, we started diving into some of the methods that are available to us on the Express instance, played around and just took a look under the hood how the Express middle chain kind of flows. And this next lesson we're going to dedicate to exploring a class that is available to us in the Express library, and this is the router class. If we take a look at the documentation real quickly, you can see that this router is an instance of Express that we can set up, and it works in a very, very similar way to the main application or the main Express instance that we set up, except that this router specifically is designed to work with middleware that is related to routing. You can think of the router as a mini application. So this Express instance that we already invoked is an instance of Express, but we can set up another instance that is the router, and this will behave as a mini Express instance in its own right. That allows us to do some really interesting things, and if you look at the documentation, it says the router behaves like middleware itself. And so you can use it as an argument to the app.use, which we've been playing around in the last lesson, as well as you can even send a router into the routers.use method on its own. And so if you take a look at the methods that are available, we have the .all, the router.method, which is all the HTTP verbs, as well as at the bottom here, we've got the router.use. So all those methods that are available to us on the normal Express application that we are playing around with, that are listed here. Some of those specific methods are also available to us on this router object that we can create. And what this means for us specifically is in the lesson where we're now talking through the design of our router, I was talking about modularizing our router in a way that it's got a router for specific high-level API. So if it's a user set of endpoints or a default route, or whether it's an account API, we can have a router that handles and modularizes the code for each one of those. We're going to make use of some of the way that this router is designed to implement our specific way of handling routing in our API. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to run through some code examples so that this makes sense. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove all the code that we wrote in the last lesson. So I'm just going to delete that out. Everything except for this ping route that we had initially. I'm going to go ahead and save our work. And if we do a quick test in Postman and we send through anything to the API, you'll see we're getting back the base Express server. No matter what we send through here, we've got no console logs either that are being printed out. So basically we've just deleted and removed our whole Express middleware chain. And so now that we've got a clean, fresh slate to start with, we can then start working with our Express router now. So the way that we set up this Express router is we can set up a constant and we'll name it router. And then we can reference the Express library, which we've imported at the top of the file. We'll say express.router, and that's with a capital R. And then we'll just invoke that to the instance of router then gets assigned to this variable router. Once we have this router variable, we can then reference the different methods that are available to us. Let's start with a first .use. So we'll use a router.use, and then I'm just going to set up a path here that we want to tell our middleware to match to, and I'm just going to reference a single // and this is basically saying whatever request comes into the API on HTTP 3000 / will then run through this next piece of middleware that we set up here. And so we'll just set up our request, our response, as well as the next function. And then we'll do a console log as we did previously. We'll give this a number and we'll name this router middleware function 1. And then let's just go ahead and invoke that next function. And for now, I'm just going to comment out the code for our ping route so that the only middleware function that we have is this router.use. If we go and test this now that we've set it up and we head over to Postman, let's just initiate a request to our API. And if I hit send here, you'll see that we're getting this 404 not found. The error from Express is coming up, but interestingly, and this is what I wanted to point out, is that there is no console log that is being dumped out to the terminal. And there's a very specific reason why, and that is because even though we've instantiated this router, we've attached the use method with our string, which is matching to the // which is just the base path. And so the final step to get this router to actually work is we need to reference our instance of Express. So that'll be HTTP server. And then we need to reference this .use function. And if we remember, the documentation said that we can use this method to mount a router onto the Express instance. So the way that we can do that is we can reference the / here, which is just the path for everything, all incoming requests that are coming in. And then we will just then, instead of passing a request handler, as the document said, the router instance acts as middleware itself. So we can just then reference this router that we've created up here on line 9. and I'm going to go ahead and save my work. And if we initiate a request now to our API on the base path and I hit send, you'll see that we do get that 404, but now we are seeing our console log with that number 1, and we're seeing that the router middleware function is being hit. So just to reiterate there, we've created an instance of router. We've attached a piece of middleware onto the router using the .use method at the base path of the router. And then we've gone ahead and we've attached that router to the base path of the .use method in the HTTP server, which is our Express instance. And therefore, any request that comes through to our API is going to get handed off straight to the router that we've passed in here. And then it's going to run through any of the middleware that we define onto that router. But one interesting thing I wanted to demonstrate here is if we uncomment out this code here for the HTTP server.get and we save our work, this get method and the part that we have here and the associated request handler, this has been registered to our Express instance and not the router instance. And then let's just go ahead and see how this kind of all works. So if we initiate some request, we'll just initiate to the base path here. We'll see that we just hit our first middleware function, which is attached to our router. If I send something through to /API, you'll see that we still hit that middleware function on the router. If I do a /API/ping and I hit send here, you'll see we get back a 200 with the JSON payload, as well as we don't actually hit our router middleware. We're only hitting the middleware that is related to the middleware that's been registered on the Express instance itself. So what's happening in this case is when the request comes through, the middleware that's been registered onto the Express instance gets matched first, because that's in the sequence of middleware it's been registered first. And then the router middleware that we've registered is registered after it. So if we go ahead and move this HTTP server.use and we register the router middleware before the middleware that we register on the Express instance, you'll see that things will change up slightly here. To test this out, we'll just do a request to API, which should just hit our middleware function on the router. But if we do an API/ping, you'll see that we still get our message back with a 200. But in this case, you'll see that we hit the router middleware first and that console log gets printed out. So what happens in this case is that it runs through the middleware. The middleware for the router is registered before the API/ping. It runs to that console log, and then this next function gets invoked and it passes it on to the next piece of middleware that's in the chain, and the next middleware that is in the chain is this .get. It matches it with the API/ping, and then it hits this request handler. But if we did API/ping/test, you'll see that we get a 404 not found. And that's because, and even though we are hitting our router middleware, it's hitting that next callback. It's passing it on to the next middleware where it's trying to match /ping/test. It doesn't find anything. And then so it just errors out with a 404 not found. The last thing I wanted to demonstrate here is if we set up a .all method on the router and we say, set this up in the same way with the wildcard. We'll set up a request handler, and then in here we'll set up a console log. We'll just reference the number 2 and we'll say router middleware catch all. And then lastly, we'll just end this request response cycle with a 404. And then we'll end that off with a JSON payload that we sent through with a message and a string, which we'll pipe through the request.url, and we'll just say not found. And so what's going to happen here is we've registered this .all method onto any path that comes through. And so the middleware chain now looks like this. The first one references this .use. So the router is going to, on every request that comes through, it's going to run this first piece of middleware. The next function is going to be invoked, and then it passes on to the next piece of middleware that's in the chain. It will then match to this entry that we've inserted here, because it's a wildcard is going to match every single path. So then on every path that is incoming, it's going to get matched to this request handler. So it's going to hit it and it's going to send back a 404. And because we've ended the request response cycle, any other middleware that we've defined after this router.all will never actually be hit. So this ping endpoint that we have here, even though we register it on the actual Express instance, this is kind of at the bottom of the order here because of this line of code here where we attach the router to Express instance. This ping is registered after everything above it. And that means that because we end the request response cycle in this piece of middleware with the wildcard string match, this API ping will never actually be hit. So in Postman, we can just send through a request to the base of our API. You'll see that we get a 404 not found. We hit our first root to middleware. We hit the second one, which is in the catch all. And so whatever we send through here, whether it's like /API, it's just going to do the same thing. And even if we send through a /API/ping, when we hit send there, you'll just see that we keep getting that 404 not found, and we actually never hitting that piece of middleware. If we cut out that ping endpoint and we place it in between the .use and the .all and we save our work, if we try and hit the API/ping endpoint, we will hit this request handler here because it's now registered in the right sequence. So back in Postman, we can just test this out. At the base path, we send through not found. We hit our first and our second piece of middleware. Even though the API now is registered in between it, the path didn't match. So if we do match the path with API/ping and we send that through, you'll see that we get back a 200. Then we get a straight up match to the API ping request handler, and then it goes and it prints out that message and sends through the response. So that concludes the little demonstration that I wanted to set up for you here. Just trying to show you exactly how this isolated express.router object that we can set up, we can use that to kind of isolate any of the route and the routing that we want to set up in our API, and we can attach it to that router. And the key points are here is that some of the exact same methods that are available to us on the Express instance is also available to us on the router instance. What's interesting is whatever middleware we attach to the router instance, we can mount that onto our Express instance using the express.use, or in our case, the HTTP server.use. And we can just mount the router and just pass all traffic that's coming into our API and send it to that router. The way that we can set up different instances of the router means that we can have a router and route definitions for very specific things in our API. And this is going to be the key to allowing us to build a very modularized routing structure in our code. So well done on making it through all of this. I could have just taken you through the exact code that we're going to be setting up eventually, but I wanted to take the time to just work through this nice and slowly, actually get a feel for how the Express middle chain works, and hopefully you've learned something a bit more about Express itself. And having this good understanding is really going to be a key part to understanding and building really good APIs using Express. So again, well done on making it through all of this. Let's take a short break here. Now that we've covered all this foundation knowledge, we're going to actually start setting up our routing. We're going to add some more files and folders to our API. So we'll set that up in the next lesson.